Welcome, dear listener, to another journey through the magical world of African folktales. Stories passed down through the winds of generations, whispered around fire circles, and cradled in the dreams of our ancestors. Today, we explore one of the most beloved tales from West Africa, the Clever Tortoise Who Outsmarted a King. It's a story of pride, power, and the quiet wisdom that even the smallest among us carry. So sit back, get comfortable, maybe even close your eyes, and travel with me to a time long ago where animals spoke, kings ruled with iron fists, and a humble tortoise dared to challenge the crown. Ulambo was no ordinary kingdom, nestled between rolling hills and rivers that shimmered like molten bronze. It was a realm where animals ruled, not in secret, but in full sovereignty. At the head of this powerful animal kingdom was King Nguvu, the lion. His name meant power in the old tongue, and true to it. He ruled with unmatched strength and pride. King Nguvu's mane was as golden as the rising sun. His roar echoed across valleys, and his throne was made of the tusks of ancient elephants. Every animal from the chattering monkeys to the majestic zebras bowed when he passed. He believed that strength was all that mattered, that wisdom belonged only to the mighty, that the slow, the quiet, the forgotten were beneath him. But fate always has a sense of humor. Torto, as he was called by the forest folk, lived at the edge of the kingdom under a large baobab tree. His shell was scratched from years of crawling through life's challenges. His legs were short, his steps slow, but his mind, sharp as the thorns on the acacia tree. Torto was a thinker, a watcher, a problem solver. Where others rushed, he observed. Where others shouted, he listened. Where others fought, he planned. And though he was mocked for his slow pace and small stature, Torto had a quiet confidence. One dry season, when the rivers ran low and the sun pressed down like a judgment, King Nguvu grew restless. He had conquered the southern territories of the hyenas and sent the rebellious crocodiles of the east slithering back into the marshes. But victory had become boring. He missed the thrill of challenge. And so one day, the king stood tall on his throne of ivory and bellowed to the entire animal kingdom. "Hear me, creatures of Ulambo. King Nguvu, ruler of the four rivers, master of claw and tooth. Declare this. Let anyone who believes themselves wiser than me step forward and prove it. Let them face me in a test of wit, and should they succeed, I shall reward them beyond their wildest dreams. But should they fail," he paused here, his sharp teeth gleaming, "they shall spend their days cleaning the royal latrine with their tongues." A shudder went through the crowd. No one dared to laugh. No one dared to challenge. For who could outwit the king? The monkeys, who were always chattering with confidence, hid behind banana leaves. The owls, who claimed wisdom in the dark, suddenly lost their words. Even the cunning jackals found their tails tucked between their legs, but far at the edge of the crowd. Barely noticed, Tortoise blinked. Slowly, he smiled. 3 days passed. The challenge stood unanswered. The king grew arrogant, smug. But on the fourth morning, as the fog still hugged the forest floor, Tortoise arrived at the palace gates. He wore no armor, carried no staff, rode no chariot, just his cracked shell, dusty from travel, and a calm expression that unnerved the guards. "Am here," he said, "to challenge the king." The guards laughed so hard their spears clattered to the ground. "You," one barked. "With what?" "Your bedtime stories and slow steps." But Tortoise did not flinch. "Take me to him. Let the king decide." And so, out of curiosity or mockery, they led him through the golden doors, past the elephant statues, into the great hall of judgment. There, King Nguvu lounged on his throne, one paw draped lazily over the side, his mane gleaming in the morning light. When he saw the tortoise, he narrowed his eyes. "You are my challenger." "I am, your majesty," Tortoise replied. bowing slowly. "I may not be fast or strong, but I have something rare thought." The court burst into laughter, but the king, intrigued, waved them silent. "So be it," he said, rising. "Let us begin." King Nguvu grinned. His teeth caught the light like daggers. "If you are so wise, Tortoise, answer me this. What is the one thing that belongs to everyone, but can never be given away or stolen, and once lost, cannot be found?" The court fell silent. Even the birds stopped chirping in the rafters. Tortoise did not answer immediately. He walked slowly in a wide circle. Thinking then, he looked up. "Majesty," he said, "the answer is time." Gasps rippled through the hall. The lion's grin faltered for the briefest of moments, but then he laughed. "Clever, very clever. 1 point to you, little shellwalker." King Nguvu clapped his paws twice. Servants brought forward 3 large boxes, one made of gold, one of wood, and one of black stone. "Inside one of these boxes is truth," the king said. "Inside another lies, and in the third, nothing at all. You may choose. Only one. Choose correctly, and you win. Choose wrongly, and your tongue will know filth for the rest of your days." Tortoise looked at the boxes carefully. The gold box gleamed brightly, as if begging to be chosen. The wooden one was plain, unremarkable. The black stone box was rough, ugly, silent. Tortoise smiled to himself. He approached the black stone box. "This one," he said. The crowd gasped. King Nguvu's eyebrow twitched. "Why?" "Because truth is rarely beautiful, rarely loud. It is hard, cold, and often hidden where no one looks." The box was opened, and inside lay a scroll etched with ancient symbols, the truth of Ulambo's founding. Lost 4 generations. Thunderous applause filled the hall. The king was furious, but smiled to keep his pride. 2 points to you, Tortoise, but beware. The next test will not be so gentle. The Lion King now leaned forward, teeth bared, voice a growl. "This game is simple. I will whisper a word to my advisor, who will whisper it to another, and so on through 10 animals. The last will say it aloud. You, Tortoise, must then guess what the original word was." Tortoise blinked, but words change when passed through mouths, especially eager ones. "Exactly," the king said with a sly grin. "Let us see how wise your hearing is." And so the game began. The king whispered into the ear of his advisor, a sly parrot who nodded gravely. The word passed from parrot to gazelle, to elephant, to mole, to fox. By the time it reached the 10th animal, a young baboon, it had twisted into nonsense. "Bamboozle stump," the baboon cried proudly. The court erupted with laughter. The king smirked. "So wise, Tortoise, what was the original word?" Tortoise didn't answer immediately. He walked to the first whisperer, the parrot, and asked him a simple question. "What shape did the king's lips make when he spoke to you?" The parrot tilted his head. "A circle, and then a flat." "Smile," Tortoise nodded. Then he turned to the baboon. "Bamboozle stump contains syllables the king wouldn't use. He speaks in royal brevity." Finally, Tortoise turned to the court. "The original word," he said confidently, "was truth." Gasps. Again, the king stood slowly. "How did you know?" "Because truth, once distorted, becomes madness, but its shadow still remains." The crowd cheered. 3 wins, but in the king's eyes, the fire of anger sparked. King Nguvu no longer smiled. He paced finally. He turned to the tortoise and said, "You are clever indeed. Too clever, aye, but let us see if your cleverness can save you from death." The room went silent. "I challenge you to the final test, the journey of shadows. You must leave the palace and return by sunrise, bringing me something I have never seen, never heard of, and cannot describe. He laughed. If you fail, you die. If you succeed, the throne is yours. Murmurs of shock rippled through the court. The tortoise only nodded. I accept. And without another word, he turned and left into the night. As the palace gates closed behind him and the torches of the court faded into flickering embers, Tortoise found himself alone beneath a moonless sky. The world was still, save for the hoot of distant owls and the whispering wind dancing through the tall grass. Tortoise walked step by slow step. Shell glinting under the stars, he pressed forward. He did not know what he was looking for. How could he? The king had demanded something impossible. Bring me something I have never seen, never heard of, and cannot describe. How does one find what has no name? But Tortoise knew something the king didn't. The journey itself often shapes the answer, and so he traveled. After hours of travel, Tortoise arrived at a great black cave carved into the belly of a mountain. This was the Cave of Echoes, a place whispered of in old tales, where even the wind told lies and the darkness listened as he stepped inside. A voice echoed through the stone, "Who walks into the mouth of silence?" "It is I, Tortoise," said a seeker of the unnamed. The voice shifted, becoming several voices, then none. Shadows moved on the walls like memories trying to escape. Then answer, seeker. What is the shape of sound? Tortoise paused. He knew this was no ordinary riddle. The cave was testing his mind, not his words. The shape of sound, he said, is the reaction it leaves behind. A cry makes fear. A song makes joy. A whisper makes curiosity. Silence. Then the cave rumbled with laughter. You may pass. And from the darkness, a small glowing stone rolled to his feet. This is a shard of forgotten questions, the voice said. It may help you find what you seek. Tortoise bowed and moved on, beyond the cave, past the cold winds of the ridge. Tortoise came to an ancient forest where no path dared enter. Here stood the tree that remembers, so old its branches twisted like timelines, and its leaves shimmered with shifting colors. Tortoise stepped beneath its canopy. I seek something the king has never seen, never heard, and cannot describe. He said aloud. The tree swayed, leaves rustling in a language older than words. Then a voice emerged, soft, tired, and filled with wisdom. Then you seek the truth he refuses to accept. Tortoise tilted his head. What truth is that? That even a lion can be caged by pride, the tree said. And that fear of being outwitted is the true weakness of kings. The tree dropped a single silver leaf, and when Tortoise caught it, it turned into a feather. What use is a feather? He asked. It belongs to a bird that doesn't exist, the tree whispered. Not in this world, not yet. Tortoise smiled. I understood. As dawn approached, the land grew quiet again. Fog hugged the ground like a secret. Tortoise now carried two strange objects, a glowing stone of forgotten questions, a feather from a bird not yet born. Still, he did not know how they would answer the riddle. Suddenly, from the mist, a figure emerged, not lion, not tortoise, not any beast known to the animal kingdom. She wore a cloak of wind, her eyes held galaxies, and her voice was music. You look lost, she said. I am not, Tortoise replied. Just uncertain. That's better than being sure and wrong, she smiled. Who are you? He asked. I am she who speaks in paradox. One dwell in the in-between, in all things unknown. I seek something that cannot be named. Then stop seeking. She said, let it find you. She touched his shell, and in that moment, Tortoise felt the weight of everything, of fear, of pride, of history lift. I have one final gift for you, she said, handing him a small mirror. But it reflects Nothing, Tortoise said, peering into its blank surface. Exactly, she whispered. It shows what cannot be seen. And then she vanished into mist. The sun had not yet broken the horizon when Tortoise returned to the palace. The guards stared in disbelief. You came back. I did, empty-handed. Tortoise only smiled. Not quite. Inside the grand hall, King Nguvu sat impatiently, his eyes red with rage and curiosity. Well, he growled, where is this thing you were meant to bring? Tortoise stepped forward and placed the 3 items before the throne: a glowing stone, a silver feather, a blank mirror. King Nguvu roared with laughter. What is this? Trinkets. Toys. You dare insult me with riddles. No, Tortoise said calmly. I bring you the thing you cannot describe. Explain. The king barked. Tortoise pointed to the mirror. This shows what you refuse to see yourself. Without your crown, without your pride, just you. Then he pointed to the feather. This came from a bird that does not exist because imagination is something you've lost. Finally, he held the stone, and this, a fragment of every question you were too proud to ask. Things you pretend to know but never truly understood. Silence gripped the hall. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. King Nguvu's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. Because for the first time, he had no answer. The animals whispered. The king, defeated, not in battle, but in understanding, stepped down from his throne. He looked at the tortoise, really looked at him, and said, You've brought me what I feared most, the truth of myself. He turned to the court and raised a paw. This tortoise is no fool. He is no joke. He is what I never was, wise. Then, to everyone's shock, the king knelt before Tortoise and placed his crown at his feet. Rule, if you wish, he said, or advise. But let Ulambo never forget wisdom lives in all shells, no matter how slow. Tortoise stood silent as the golden crown of Ulambo lay at his feet. The crowd of animals murmured, confused and curious. Some were in awe, others doubtful. Finally, Tortoise looked down at the crown, then up at the lion who once wore it. I did not come for a throne, he said gently. I came to remind the kingdom that strength is not just in claws, but in questions. The lion bowed his head in agreement. Then take your place beside the throne. Let your voice be the whisper behind every decision. And so, from that day forward, Tortoise became the royal advisor of Ulambo, the mind beside the muscle, the thinker beside the throne. But peace, as always, was a fragile thing in the weeks that followed. Ulambo began to change. Disputes were solved with reasoning rather than roars. Resources were shared more fairly. The young came to the palace not for favors, but for wisdom. Yet not everyone celebrated far in the shadows of the court. A pair of narrow eyes watched Tortoise with burning contempt. They belonged to Hyena, the whisperer, a master manipulator who had once advised the king in secret, feeding him lies and flattery. With Tortoise in power, Hyena's influence had withered, and envy grew like mold in his mind. This slow-footed reptile has turned the king soft, Hyena muttered. What is a kingdom where fear is replaced with fairness, where questions replace commands? And so he began to whisper again, but not to the king, to others, to those who missed the old order. One morning, the palace awoke to screams from the royal kitchen. The chief chef, a wise old goat, had collapsed, his fur drenched in sweat, eyes wide with terror. The king's breakfast. Someone yelled, "It's been poisoned." Immediately, suspicion swept through the court like wildfire. Who would do such a thing? Was it an enemy? A spy? A rival from the north? But no clues were found, just a broken gourd near the window, still smelling faintly of bitter root. When the king called for Tortoise, he said, "Your mind has brought us peace. Now use it to protect it. Find the poisoner." The tortoise bowed. "I will." But in his heart, he knew this was not an external enemy. This was wrought from within. Tortoise began with observation. He said nothing, asked no questions. But he watched. He noticed how Hyena always sat too far from the throne now, always flanked by two jackals with darting eyes. He noted how the gossip in the marketplace had shifted, more rumors of weakness, more questions about the kings. Decisions, and then, in the dead of night, he crept to the courtyard where the broken gourd had been found. There, beneath a loose tile, he found a pouch containing more bitter root. He returned to the court and said only, "I request a trial of silence." A murmur rippled through the hall. The trial of silence was ancient, a test of truth based not on argument, but on unease. Each suspect would sit in silence, facing the court. Watched, scrutinized. No words, just presence. Tortoise lined up three: a kitchen mouse, a young crocodile servant, and Hyena, the whisperer. As the silence stretched, the room became thick with tension. The mouse trembled. The crocodile fidgeted. But Hyena, he grinned too confidently. Tortoise nodded. "That is the face of guilt." "Explain yourself," the king growled, rising from his throne. Hyena stood, no longer pretending. "Fine," he hissed. "Yes, I did it. I who once shaped this kingdom from the shadows. I who taught you to rule with fear. And now you let this turtle, this slow-footed fool, turn our court into a library?" Tortoise stepped forward, calmly. "You mistook silence for weakness, but wisdom often walks quietly." Hyena snarled, "You will never last. The kingdom loves drama, not logic. Strength, not slowness." Tortoise looked him in the eye and replied, "Perhaps, but remember this. The wind, though invisible, shapes the tallest trees. And even a lion listens when the forest is quiet." The court erupted with cheers. The king ordered Hyena banished to the outer sands, never to return. And once again, Tortoise had used no blade, only thought in the weeks that followed. The story of the trial of silence spread through Ulambo like sunrise, through fog. Young ones in schools acted it out in plays. The elders told it at fireside gatherings, and always they repeated the lesson. Even when the loudest voice is gone, the wisest one remains. The king grew prouder of Tortoise by the day. "You've changed me," he said, "not by challenge, but by calm. Not with force, but with questions." Tortoise smiled. That is how change lasts. It began subtly, a single day without rain, then a week, then a month. The rivers slowed to trickles, and the one-screen plains of Ulambo cracked and gasped under the scorching sun. Crops wilted, waterholes dried up, the animals, once joyous under the new wisdom of the court, began to murmur. Some said it was nature. Others whispered of curses. By the second moon without rainfall, flocks of birds began to migrate early. The zebras moved west. The wildebeest eyed the borderlands. Even the elephants, who seldom moved in haste, began to plan a journey. The kingdom was drying, so were tempers. And though the king remained strong beside his advisor, the tension was beginning to burn. One misty morning, as the palace awoke to yet another dry sunrise, a white figure appeared at the edge of the eastern ridge. It was Heron, the grab-ache, the wandering prophet. He had not been seen in Ulambo for many seasons. He entered the court without a word, his wings cloaked in dust, his staff of bone clicking with each step. The crowd hushed as he raised a single feather in the air and spoke. "The drought is not of sky, but of memory." Everyone looked around in confusion. "What does that mean?" asked the young gazelle. The heron's eyes glowed faintly. A lesson was forgotten, a promise broken. Then he turned to Tortoise. "And you, wise one, you sit where many have fallen, but wisdom alone cannot break what pride once sealed." He threw a scroll onto the palace floor. It was old, torn, and written in a language few remembered. Tortoise picked it up. It read, "When the lion yields, the sky must be fed." That night, Tortoise stayed awake, unrolling ancient scrolls, calling on the kingdom's oldest scribes, owl historians, and monkey scholars. They dusted off tales, long-buried riddles, disguised as parables, and slowly, the truth emerged, a forgotten pact. Generations ago, a lion king once ruled Ulembo with terror. When he was finally overthrown, not by rebellion, but by remorse, a shaman made a deal with the sky: so long as Ulembo never silences the wise and honors humility, the rains shall fall. But pride had returned in subtle ways. First, with the poisoned gourd, then with whispers of doubt. The old ways were creeping back in. Tortoise now saw the danger. The drought was more than weather. It was a spiritual warning. Tortoise addressed the royal council. "We must renew the covenant," he said. "We must restore humility to our court." But some, especially the younger warriors, disagreed. "Humility will not fill rivers." Roared Rhino, "We need to act. Dig deeper wells, seize water from the north." Others, like the clever monkeys, suggested bringing in sky charmers from distant lands, expensive, powerful, and unpredictable. The council fractured. Even the king began to hesitate. "I trust you," he told Tortoise, "but my people grow thirsty. They look for results, not riddles." Tortoise bowed. "Then, give me 3 days. Let me try." The ancient way. Tortoise sent word across the kingdom. A call for every creature once mocked, every voice ever ignored. The limping, the stuttering, the slow, the shy. The ones who'd been overlooked. They gathered outside the palace gates, dozens of them. A porcupine who spoke only in poems. A blind mole who remembered every sound. A hare who had failed every speed race but won hearts with kindness. Together, they followed Tortoise into the dry fields. They sang no songs, carried no tools. They simply walked, and for 3 days they visited every dried river, every sun-scorched hill, every empty stream, and at each place they told stories, not just any stories, but truths, of old kings who fell to pride, of queens who listened, of mistakes repeated. They poured their memories into the soil, and then it rained. It began as a single drop, then 2, then dozens falling from a sky that had for months remained silent. Rain, first hesitant, then full, like a memory returning all at once. Animals cried out with joy. The riverbeds drank hungrily. The trees danced as green returned to their fingertips. Ulembo came alive again, and the credit went not to warriors, not to charms, but to Tortoise and the humble voices of those once ignored. The king himself walked barefoot into the fields and joined the dance. His mane soaked, his laughter louder than thunder. "Wisdom," he roared, "has broken the drought." But in the celebration, another storm brewed quietly, far beyond the kingdom, beyond the jagged mountains and ghost rivers. A lone figure heard of Ulembo's revival. It was Hyena, the whisperer. Banished, forgotten, but not broken. He sat in a cave with old maps, worn books, and one broken tooth, a reminder of his last encounter with Tortoise. "So the sky returns, and the slow one gets the glory," he muttered. He had heard rumors. The kingdom had grown too soft, the king too trusting, the tortoise too powerful, and worse. The animals now believed in stories, in humility, in unity. It made his blood boil. "It's time I write a different story," he growled, "one with a sharper ending." As Ulembo basked in its return to life, something slipped through the border under cover of mist. A slender figure with silver scales and eyes like coals. Njoka, the cobra priestess of the outer reaches. She had once ruled a desert cult, known for her ability to twist truth and venom into the same breath. And now, she had allied with Hyena. "I need a symbol," he told her. "A sign to the people that the tortoise's wisdom can fail." She coiled beside him, whispering, "Then you must strike the heart, not the shell." A plan formed, clever, cruel, and quiet. 2 days after the rain began, strange things happened. Fish floated to the surface of the river, dead. A monkey child drank from a pond and fell ill. Then an elephant calf collapsed in the field. Fear returned. "It's the water," cried the giraffes. "It carries something wrong." The king ordered all streams closed, guards stationed, wells inspected. Tortoise was summoned. "I do not believe this is nature," he said. "The sky healed us, but someone is trying to unheal us." He ordered an investigation, and with a team of badgers, frogs, and otters, he traced the contamination upstream to a single hidden jug tucked in the roots of a tree. Inside, a bitter black paste. Tortoise dipped a claw, sniffed it, and frowned. "This is whisper root, a rare venom, one only known by the outer desert cults." His shell felt suddenly cold. "Hyena," he whispered. "He's back." The next day, a crowd gathered at the foot of the hills. A preacher stood on a rock, his fur ragged, but his voice loud. It was Hyena, but cloaked, veiled, claiming to be a prophet from the forgotten north. He told tales of deception. The rain you praise was not a gift of wisdom, but a trap. "Look at the sickness. Look at your rivers." The crowd murmured. "Your tortoise has read too many scrolls and forgotten the smell of danger." "Who is he?" one gazelle whispered. "He speaks truth," said a warta, and in the shadows, Njoka the cobra hissed in delight. Doubt was returning, not through battle, but through words. The sun rose like a trumpet. The day of the royal wedding had arrived, the most extravagant celebration Ulambo had ever seen. Banners flew, drums thundered. Dancers spiraled like leaves in the wind. But Tortoise did not celebrate. He watched, listened, calculated. Inside the palace, Queen Zarya prepared herself. Her golden robe flowed like water. Her mane shimmered with jewels from 5 kingdoms. But she wore something beneath it, a chain of black stone beads, each carved with northern court runes, symbols of binding, not of union, but of dominion. At the stroke of midday, the ceremony began. King Bakar waited atop the tree of unity, where past kings had spoken oaths of peace and rule, as Queen Zarya walked the path of petals. Minister Nundo disappeared behind the throne. No one noticed except Tortoise, because just beneath the stage, Nundo and a group of leopard guards placed sealing stones into the wood. Enchanted relics that would bind backers thrown to Zarya's bloodline, a silent coup. Legal, permanent, it wasn't a takeover of war. It was marriage rewritten as conquest, as the final vows were spoken. The sky held its breath. Just as the high priest began the binding rites, a quiet but firm voice echoed. "Across the platform, Your Majesty, before your final vow, I request a moment of truth." All heads turned. Tortoise stepped forward, holding a large scroll. Queen Zarya narrowed her eyes. "You dare disrupt this moment." Tortoise bowed, only to protect it. He unfurled the scroll, a royal charter of Ulambo, ancient, sacred, and written in the language of both lion and leopard. "This document," he said, "proves that any external enchantment placed upon the king's seat without full council approval is a violation of our oldest laws." The priest gasped. The court murmured. Zarya's paw twitched. "You have no proof," she hissed. Tortoise nodded. "Not yet. But let us ask the throne itself." He tapped his shell. From behind the crowd, a team of young porcupines emerged, dragging one of the sealing stones Nundo had placed beneath the tree. The enchantment glowed. "The throne has been bound," Tortoise said. Without consent, chaos broke. Queen Zaria stepped back. The illusion shattered. She dropped her veil of kindness and let her voice rise like steel. "You call it a crime. I call it evolution. You animals live in stories. I bring systems." Guards rushed forward. Zaria's personal warriors drew blades. But before a battle began, King Bakar stood loud, proud, furious. "You tried to rule me before you stood beside me. You wanted my crown, not my heart." He turned to the court. "Let her go, but never let her back." Zaria roared once, but realized it was over. She turned, walked away. Her golden robe never touched the ground again. There was no wedding that day, but there was a feast, not of ceremony, but of freedom. The animals ate under open skies. They sang not of queens and kings, but of tortoises, of truth, of how once again the smallest creature saw what the strongest missed. Later that night, the king sat beside Tortoise and asked, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Tortoise smiled. "You wouldn't have believed me until she showed you who she was." "And how did you know?" He looked up at the stars. "Because when power hides in silk, it forgets that wisdom never sleeps." And so, the story of the clever tortoise who outsmarted a king came to an end, not with swords or spells, but with scrolls, stories, and sense. Ulumbo entered a golden age. New schools opened. Old stories were taught beside mathematics and strategy. And every year, on the day of the almost wedding, a single white feather was placed at the foot of the tree of unity. Not as a warning, but as a reminder that the cleverest hero doesn't run the fastest, doesn't roar the loudest, doesn't fly the highest. Sometimes the one who saves the world walks slowly, speaks gently, and carries wisdom in a shell.